Let's start by reviewing the mathematical definition of slope. Slope is a ratio, and it is the ratio of the change in the y-coordinates of every point on the line to the change in the x-coordinates of every point on the line. So change in y over change in x, and we have been using delta y over delta x to talk about slope. Now today we're going to find the slope. Algebraically, we're going to use the slope formula. And to find the slope and the line, and this has been true whether we've been on a graph or a table, we've seen 2 points in a mini table, we have to have 2 points, okay? So if I have 2 points on the line, one of them has an x-coordinate and a y-coordinate, and the second one has an x-coordinate and a y-coordinate. But in order to tell them apart, I'm going to use subscripts. I'm going to call the first coordinates, the x-coordinate and the y-coordinate of the first point, x sub 1, y sub 1. Notice those are little ones. They're down at the base of the letter, and we read that as x sub 1, y sub 1. And the second point, I'm going to call its coordinates x sub 2, y sub 2. And the reason that we use subscripts is so that we can use x and y for both of them to know that we're talking about x coordinates and y coordinates. But we can tell them apart. We know that the ones that have a subscript of 1 go with the first point, and the ones that have a subscript of 2 go with the second point. Now, the slope formula is this. You may remember that the abbreviation for slope is m. So we say m is, now when we find the change of something, slope is the change in y. What mathematical operation finds the change in something? It's subtraction. So when I find the change in the y-coordinate, I'm going to take y sub 2 and I'm going to subtract y sub 1. That's the change in y. I find change by subtracting. Over the change in the x-coordinates is x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So I found the change in the x-coordinates by subtracting. So the slope formula says that the slope is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So here's what this is going to look like. I am going to label my 2 points. I've already written the slope formula. I'm going to label the first point x sub 1, y sub 1, and I'm going to label the second point x sub 2, y sub 2. Now, where the slope formula can cause problems is that it involves subtraction. So when we're subtracting and we have negatives, we've got to be careful, okay? So it is a ratio. So I'm going to draw my fraction bar, and I'm going to go ahead and put my subtraction signs in there, okay? Now, I'm going to fill it in like I see it. So y sub 2 is 2 minus y sub 1 is negative 2. So I need to put that negative in parentheses. Remember, when you substitute a negative into an expression, it's always good to put it in parentheses. And then x sub 2 is 3. My change of x goes on bottom, minus x sub 1 is negative 3. So I'm going to put that negative 3 in parentheses because I'm substituting a negative. Now I need to simplify this. So 2 minus the negative 2 minus a negative becomes plus a positive. 2 plus 2 is 4 over 3 minus a negative 3 becomes 3 plus 3. So that's 4 over 6. And I get 2/3. All right. So let's do the next one. I'm going to label my 2 points, x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2. So I'm finding the slope. Slope is the ratio. It's the ratio of the change in y over the change in x. So I'm going to go ahead and put my subtraction sign there. Y sub 2 is negative 1 minus y sub 2 is 2. X sub 2 is 2 minus x sub 1 is 0. So I took those values and plugged them into the formula. So negative 1 minus 2 is negative 3 over 2 minus 0 is 2. That is simplified. I want to leave it as an improper fraction. Never change slope to a mixed number. Now, one of the important things to make sure you pay attention to, whichever point you start with first has to be written first for both the numerator and the denominator. So since I started with y sub 2 right here, I put x sub 2 here. You can make either one, x1, y1, x2, y2, but you have to start with the same point the coordinates for the same point need to be in the same place in the formula. Let's look at two special cases. So I have the point -1, 2. I'm going to label it x sub 1, y sub 1. And 5, 2, I'm going to label x sub 2, y sub 2. So slope is the ratio of the change in y over the change in x. So I'm going to go ahead and put my subtraction sign there. So y sub 2 is 2, y sub 1 is 2. So I end up with 2 minus 2 in the numerator. X sub 2 is 5 minus x sub 1 is -1. When I substitute that -1, I'm going to put it in parentheses. So 2 minus 2 is 0 over 5 minus a -1 becomes 5 plus 1, and I get 6. Well, what is 0 divided by 6? What is 0 divided by anything? 0. Okay, so this is a special case. If I were to graph these two lines, and I'm just going to do uh, a brief little sketch. So -1, 2 is right here, and 5, 2 is right here. What kind of line is that? That's a horizontal line, right? And a horizontal line has 0 slope. So when 0 is in the numerator, the line has 0 slope. Okay, so the next one, I have -3, 0. I'm going to label that x sub 1, y sub 1. -3, 6. I'm going to label that x sub 2, y sub 2. So I'm finding the ratio of the change in y over the change in x. So y sub 2 is 6 minus y sub 1 is 0. X sub 2 is -3 minus x sub 1 is -3. So 6 minus 0 is 6 over -3 minus a -3 becomes -3 plus 3, which is 0. Well, what happens when I divide by 0? I can't divide by 0. Division by 0 is not possible, so this line has a slope that is undefined. So what do you think these 2 points, if we graphed them, what would the line through them look like? The line through those 2 points is a vertical line because a vertical line has undefined slope. Now, one way to remember this, if you have 0 in the numerator, that is okay. So 0 in the numerator is okay, and it equals 0. If you have 0 in the denominator, that's a big NO. And if you have 0 in the denominator, that slope would be undefined. So that's one way that might help you to remember how to answer a question when you get 0 in the numerator or 0 in the denominator. Here are two for you to try. So you find the slope between the points 210 and 415. The slope between the points 210 and 415 is 5 halves. 15 minus 10 is 5, 4 minus 2 is 2. That is simplified. Leave it improper. Okay, now we have the points 5, -12 and 5, -9. Using the slope formula, find the slope between those 2 points. Using my formula, I did -9 minus a -12 over 5 minus 5. That gave me 3 over 0 when 0 is in the denominator. That slope is undefined. If I were to plot those 2 points, I would get a vertical line. The slope of a vertical line is undefined.